Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, Mr. Bach. Appreciate you giving us the opportunity to hand out some service awards tonight during the commission meeting. I'm going to have Major Quinn come up and MC it.
Thank you for allowing us to recognize the great work done by our officers every day out in the streets. And the first award that we will be presenting tonight is the Meritorious Service Award. I would like Officer Andrews to come forward, please. On this incident, also Wyandotte County Deputy Andrew O'Neill would have been receiving an award as well. However, he could not make it this evening. The Meritorious Service Award, a department member who performs an exceptional act, unaware of great personal danger prior to initiating the act, but performs in a commendable manner. Upon becoming aware of the danger, is eligible for the Exemplary Service Award for Meritorious Service. On February 23rd, 2019, units responded to the 7300 block of State Avenue on a suicidal party. On arrival, a male was seen on the third-story balcony with a rope around his neck, tied to the railing, and yelling he wanted to die. The KCK Fire Department forced entry into the residence. Officer Andrews and Deputy O'Neill ran to the balcony where the male had started to climb over, saying he wanted to die. The male was armed with a large knife. Officer Andrews was able to disarm the male, while Deputy O'Neill cut the rope from the railing. The male continually struggled against the officer and deputy, who were able to wrestle him down and take him into protective custody. He was transported to the hospital for evaluation. The officer and deputy have received the Meritorious Service Award. If I could have Officer Anthony Johnson please come forward. He is also receiving the Meritorious Service Award this evening. On October 14th, 2018, Officer Anthony Johnson was on a disturbance in the 2400 block of North 18th Street when he was approached by an unidentified citizen stating there was another disturbance in another area of the parking lot. Officer Johnson followed the citizen to the disturbance where a male subject was sitting inside a vehicle. The driver of the vehicle is pointing an unknown object at the citizen who led Johnson to that location. The driver began to move his vehicle and Johnson gave verbal commands to stop. The driver then turned towards Officer Johnson and pointed a black handgun at Officer Johnson. Officer Johnson was able to draw his weapon and fire several rounds at the suspect while defending himself. The vehicle sped away and was later recovered abandoned. A small amount of blood was located inside the vehicle, which confirmed the identity of the driver. The officer is receiving the Meritorious Service Award. If I could have the members of the Narcotics Unit and Intelligence Unit please come forward. They will be receiving the Lancaster Melton Award of Merit. This is awarded to the hardworking officers that put their colleagues and the citizens of Kansas City, Kansas above themselves. This includes, but is not limited to, officers who make an outstanding arrest or dedicate long and countless hours to accomplish an extensive task that makes Kansas City, Kansas a better and safer place to live and work. On May 16, 2019, the KCKPD had 7 reported narcotic overdoses. Each of the overdoses were thought to be cocaine laced with fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. The potent nature of the fentanyl is life-threatening. The narcotics and intel units sprang into action, working countless hours of tireless dedication, then enabled them to track down the source of this deadly drug within a few short days before it harmed and or killed other members of our community. The narcotics and intel units are receiving the Lancaster Melton Award of Merit. So for this next incident, we will be presenting a couple of different awards. If I can have Officer Jared Johnstone and Dispatcher Pam Carver come to the front, please. Officer Johnstone will be receiving the Valor Award, which is department members who have distinguished themselves by conspicuous bravery, heroism, or other outstanding action, and were aware of great personal danger prior to the performance of the act, are eligible for the Exemplary Service Award for Valor. Sergeant Wade Smith will also be receiving this award, however, he could not make it this evening. Dispatcher Pam Carver will be receiving a certificate of commendation in coin. It's a department entity or member who performs an act that distinguishes itself by exceptionally admirable quality, service to the department, the community, or the member personally, for performance of duty or duties clearly above which would be normally expected, thus bringing credit to the department or community, is eligible for the certificate of commendation. On April 25th, 2019, officers were dispatched to an armed robbery in progress at CVS at 3750 State Avenue. The 911 call taker, Detective Angela Periot, received crucial information and kept the caller calm to handle the incident safely. The information included advising the dispatcher that shots were being fired inside the location and directing the caller to safety. The dispatcher, Pam Carver, handled the situation in a calm and controlled manner that allowed the needed information to be heard by the officers and alerted various units of the critical incident. Arriving units came into contact with a suspect armed with a handgun that began shooting at the officers. Sergeant Wade Smith and Officer Jared Johnstone returned fire, defending themselves in a life-threatening situation. The suspect was struck and taken into custody by the officers. Detective Angela Periot would have received a Distinguished Service Award, however, she could not make it this evening. So Officer Johnstone is receiving the Valor Award, and Dispatcher Carver is receiving the certificate of commendation. That concludes the awards that we're presenting this evening. Thank you.
Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for allowing us to give out the service awards tonight.
Thank you. Chief Ziegler, thanks to all the members of the police department here today, civilian and non-civilian, and thank you for stepping out there every day to protect and defend this community. Thank you. All right. Next is our consent agenda. Does any member of the commission, staff, or citizen in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on tonight's consent agenda? You would need to step forward at this time, state your name and city of residency for the record, and ask that that item be set aside. If an item is not set aside, all items on the consent agenda will be voted on by one vote.
Move to approve all items as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Walter. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have a public hearing to consider a resolution of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds for the Turner Logistics Center. In addition, we have a resolution approving the development agreement for the Turner Logistics Center. Before we take public comments, I'll ask staff to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item on this agenda is regarding the Turner Logistics Center. We're very pleased to move forward with this $150 million development this evening. It is one that really takes advantage of a new investment that we're making along with the state of Kansas and federal government before that project is even underway. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Catherine Carter, our Director of Economic Development, to present the project and our action this evening.
All right, good evening. Catherine Carter, Director of Economic Development. The Turner Logistics Center, we're going to go through just kind of, I know most of you have seen this, but for the viewing public, we'll go through a few slides and kind of reiterate what the program is and what the project is. I also have Brent Miles here from North Point Development, who will also be presenting with me and will be here for any questions. I'm just going to switch. So part of this project really is the interchange here at Turner Diagonal. This is a project that has needed to kind of be reorganized and realigned for many decades. This is something that both the unified government as well as KDOT and others have been trying to get the funding to do for quite some time. About 6 months ago, we were awarded a build grant from the Federal Highway Administration, and this will allow us to move forward with this realignment. Basically what will happen here is, rather than kind of the spaghetti of ramps that it is currently, it will be nice, very simple diamond shape that you've seen in a lot of other areas. This will make it much easier for truck traffic to get through, as well as pedestrians to cross I-70, as well as opening up a good amount of land for development that has been kind of landlocked up until this point. This is, because of the federal money that is involved, this will be a prevailing wage project, and it'll be a combination of federal money, KDOT, UG, as well as the developer North Point is also contributing to the project. And now I will introduce Brent Miles, who will talk a bit more about the specific center.
Thank you, Catherine, Mayor and Commissioners. Brent Miles with North Point Development. It's been a while since I've seen you all. I just wanted to give a quick little snapshot here about North Point, since you haven't seen us for a while. I'm proud of this. We are now the second and closely becoming the largest privately held industrial landlord in the United States. So we started, as you know, about 8 years ago, and we own about just shy of 69 million square feet of industrial space in 15 states across the country. We're General Motors' largest landlord in the country, Chewy.com's largest landlord, and but we have our hometown roots obviously still here. And as you all know, Wyandotte County in particular is very, very important to me. We have a good track record with you all from our redevelopment of the former GM site down in Fairfax, the Racer Trust with GM, the public levy and the redevelopment of that, the demolition of 9 buildings in Cobb Point. We own buildings on Kansas Avenue, our multifamily out in Village West area. So we're proud of that. And we're proud that we've had a development agreement with you all, and I think we've went above and beyond our development agreement every time. Sometimes when it even wasn't required, we went above and beyond our development agreement, and I'll address that a little bit tonight. So the Turner project, Turner Commerce Center, is just one of those that we originally bought the foreclosed residential property, as you know, off Riverview, and we had a development agreement with you, and then Amazon came along, and we sold to Amazon. And with that, we focused our attention north of I-70 on both sides of College Parkway on the east and west sides. And right now, we've acquired about 300 acres from about 18 to 20 different folks in that area. So we have been amassing that land over time, which was, I thought, going to be the hardest part. The hardest part actually became, how do we get federal and state funds to fund this interchange? For those of you who don't know, we worked in concert with the UG. We made 4 applications. We were told no 3 times. On the 4th time, I thought it was going to be a no, and I think it was Doug and maybe John Stevens and our attorneys all called within a 10-minute time frame when I was in a meeting, and I called Doug back, and he said, we got the money. And it was a really, really big event for all of us. The impact of this, I just want to kind of, you see these on a paper, but maybe it doesn't resonate. $155 million, and that's just our money. That doesn't count what the tenants put in the building. The size of this park, just in perspective, this park will be about the size that the Will Heights have built over, you guys have been here longer than me, 30 to 40 years. So this represents a massive industrial park. It's the largest industrial park that you've had in the county since the things were done in Edwardsville, and it's the largest planned industrial park you've had in the county. I wouldn't really count the Will Heights as a planned industrial park. So this is a really big investment, really big park. We estimate on the conservative side about 1,800 jobs. I think it'll be more than that. If you look at what we've done in Riverside on a per square foot basis, it should eclipse 2,000, 2,500 jobs. But just conservatively, I think it'll be about 1,800 jobs. And then obviously leveraging about $30 million in infrastructure funds You know what we build. You've seen Cobb Point. You've seen the GM building down in Fairfax. This is what we build in Riverside, Class A, institutional-grade buildings. The development agreement itself, obviously, you have a metric system. We've agreed to, we've obviously committed more than $50 million in capital investment. We're in a distressed area by your standard. This is federally highly distressed by census tract standards, which is how your map was derived. We've agreed to the highest of the local minority women participation, and we've agreed to the environmental design incorporated right into our buildings. That used to be LEED certification. It's now Green Globes is the new certification that everyone's doing on industrial. While you can't do it, I want you to hear directly from me why you can't put this in the development agreement. It isn't something that you can negotiate, as your lawyers will tell you. We have interviewed 2 contractors. Both of those contractors for this job are folks that are chasing the interchange project. Both are union contractors. You have my verbal commitment, like you had on Cobb Point, which we did do, that this job, for the most part on infrastructure, will be using a high amount of union contractors. I know that's important to many of you. It's important to me. And again, I know the state law, but I'm telling you, because of the size of the project and the amount of money that we're putting into it, the probability of the union work on this is high. On the building side, it's going to be a mixed bag, just bluntly. We had a mixed bag. Steel, yes. Concrete, probably no. Roofing, probably yes. So you just get into individual trades. We plan on starting our infrastructure, grading, sewer, water, to go in tandem with the interchange. We're highly communicative with KDOT and the KTA and the timeline of the design-build contract. We want that interchange to open, and we want our building to open literally within the same week. We are prospecting already for this site. I think that we will come out of the chute with at least 1 building, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have that building 50% leased and in the first year and starting a second building to expedite your timeline. Catherine mentioned a cost share agreement. We have a cash infusion out of North Point in to make your the cost share. That was a major factor in your grading system of how we got the federal funds. And then obviously we've agreed to a pilot that repays the unified government back over time for their cost share of the agreement as well. We think it's a great project. We've spent a lot of hours and a lot of trips to DC and Topeka trying to get to tonight. And as I jokingly say, we're almost to the starting line. So answer any questions that you guys might have.
Open the, is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor?
Good evening. My name is Greg Kendall, President of the Wyandotte Economic Development Council and a resident of KCK. Mayor, Commissioners, UG team, I'm here in support of issuing the industrial revenue bonds, the development agreement, and the creation of a community improvement district that you'll hear next between the unified government and North Point Development. If the trend continues as it has over the last 5 years, we lease or put under construction about 2 million square feet annually. We need the estimated 2.7 million square feet that's being planned to meet the market demand and to create a long-term property tax generator. There is a significant amount of public infrastructure that needs to be improved in this site, as we all know. I think the agreement as proposed does a good job of using public and private funds to move this forward. As important is the utilization of this area for job creation. We look forward to the opportunity to work with North Point as new living wage jobs are created to help position Wyandotte County residents as the first option in collaboration with our workforce partners like KCK Community College in this same corridor. North Point Development has shown their ability to transform sites and to follow through on their commitments at multiple locations in Kansas City, Kansas, and to move these census tracts out of being a distressed census tracts designation, as Brent noted. I commend the developer and the UG for once again being creative and putting this together, and I urge you all to support this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, yes, sir.
It's not opposition.
Uh,
We're just curious.
Please come forward and speak to the microphone, state your name and the city of residency.
Rick Wybreck, I'm a resident of Wyandotte County. It's not for or against, we're just curious about the plans of the project for the people who live there. You know, our concern is, you know, it's moving to industrial where we're residential. So what does that mean for my property value? I've seen properties in industrial just, you know, go to have value. So for us living there, what does that mean? You know, are we gonna have to pay for sewers? Are we gonna have to deal with trucks and lighting? You know, we just have a lot of questions and it's hard to see. There's nothing out there.
Sure.
So,
Yes. Brent? Catherine?
Mayor and Commission, the plan that you see here obviously has housing near. I won't go into any details unless you'd like me to. We've made offers and under acquisition for a number of houses along 69th Street. I specifically invited Matt Watkins here tonight. I just asked Matt if we can follow up with this gentleman and talk to him about, you know, an offer or whatever it is. We want to use care in who can be acquired. And obviously, for those who can't, we're going to obviously be working with Rob and his team, landscaping, setback, lighting, all the things that we know, noise. Those are all things that we understand that will be of concern to the commission and the planning commission. So I would just say that we can do, we're in the acquisition mode, as well as we'll be cognizant of being a good kind of community partner.
And so have you scheduled a time to get together to?
I didn't catch the gentleman's name, so I don't know if Matt, we have a list of folks, so maybe we can step out with, after this hearing, we can catch up with him.
there's just a lot of ifs. You know, it's a lot of ifs this and if that. You know, and I hate planning our life on ifs.
Sure.
So
Correct.
that was the
Yeah,
only
for
question.
sure.
All right,
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Mayor, Commissioners, I'm Jason Faust.
Please come to the microphone and
Good evening. I am Jason Faust. I live on 69th Street, immediately adjacent to this project. I'd like to begin by commenting that this public meeting is the first ray of sunlight on this project. And while the proponents of the endeavor have used quite a lot of rosy language and salacious numbers to show their side of the argument, tonight's meeting is the first time that I've been exposed to any of this slideshow presentation to indicate anything more detailed than the documents that were published as part of the agenda for tonight's meeting. So in addition to the previous commenter's question about needing to get additional information and lots of questions answered about this project, because essentially you're going to be replacing a residential use surrounding me, my house, on 3 sides with heavy industrial or industrial to some degree. So I would need to know quite a lot of information. Additionally, the proposed ordinance for tonight is to create a community improvement district. I would need to have quite a lot of information about what exactly that entails. If it is, what type of zoning is going to be applied, what type of rules and regulations, what type of amenities that affords to the developer, and quite a lot of details there. So I would definitely press that point as part of this development, and also additional public release of this information as we move forward. I would also add to that, Mr. Mayor, sorry. To my knowledge, here in the audience, there are only 2 persons here from our street, and I am not aware of any of our neighbors, apart from the ones that the gentleman has referenced, speaking to about land acquisition, have even been made aware of the existence of this proposal.
so, Catherine, would you speak to?
I mean, we have been, this is the 4th public meeting that we've had on this topic. You know, when it comes to, you know, it is a private project when all is said and done. So, you know, any of the land acquisition and things like that, we, you know, kind of have the developer deal with and only get involved if absolutely necessary. In terms of the CID, there would be no additional assessment on the property owners in the area. This is solely on the industrial space that would be located there.
But clearly, there would be need for more communication with gentlemen and the folks who live there. So we've commitment from North Point to carry through on that.
Sure.
Right, yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. I'll close the public hearing and ask if there are any commission questions or comments. Commissioner Philbrook?
Well, thank you. And I'm sorry that there's folks that were not aware about what's going on there. I know that there were probably some information that was mailed out, but you may have been outside of that perimeter and therefore didn't know. I had several people ask me about it that lived on that street, and I had a conversation with them about what was going on and told them that if they were interested, you know, who to contact and talk to. But it was not either one of these two folks that came forward. The other thing is that I do want to say about this project is that they've been working on this for quite a while, and I want to thank North Point, going way back to the Amazon thing, about giving up their property there, because that's what they were going to do on that location, and letting Amazon come in and helping assist in that conversation. Also, having Brent Miles and his folks with North Point spend so many trips back east to get the money approved for us to get that interchange taken care of, because that is definitely a major problem at this point, and it did lock up a lot of properties. It will take probably, I don't know, 15 years to get maybe all of this done. So it's not going to happen tomorrow. But the beginning is going to happen as fast as North Point can get the ball rolling. And I look forward to see, there's some properties that were actually bought that had no promise of being anything but a wooded lot, which I love wooded lots and I like to walk through them, but it wasn't making any money for it, and it actually was some of our property. And they actually bought it instead of us giving it to them, which, thank you very much for buying the property from the UG. And then the other thing is that I really want to see, I'm excited about this, but I want to watch it as it develops and see how it comes out, what kind of people come in. But I also do want to see that our local folks get hired. So community college, I'm sure, you know, will be working on those pipelines. They already are. And along with the high school working on pipelining people into the community college. So this is a big win-win. And in the past, from what my experience with North Point is they are very good neighbors. And even if you have a house close by, you know, it may look better than what your yard looked like next door previously. So thank you very much for coming forward and coming into our community and working with us.
Thank you. Commissioner Kane?
Mr. Miles, could you please step back up?
Good evening, Commissioner.
You know this is coming. All right, there was conversation.
Was it a
about-
compliment? No, okay.
Mr. Miles and I go back the whole 14 years I've been a commissioner, so even when he was on the A team, when he went to the B team.
Yeah, I did go to the B team.
But the comment was made about a living wage. Do we have an approximate what that would be?
You know, so we don't have any tenants for this building. We're building them speculative. So if you look at what we did in Riverside, I view this as our replacement to Riverside. I think that's always been our goal with Turner and Riverside's down to its last building. In Riverside, I looked because I knew you would ask probably. Angela could back me up on this. In Riverside, we're averaging somewhere north of 50,000, maybe just over 52,000. And now a lot of those, the majority of those are automotive related. As you know, you have to be within 16 miles to be a tier 1 because of the new cutoff times for the plant. we can do that from Turner. We've been doing that from Riverside to service both GM and Ford. So about 60% of our employment base in Riverside is automotive related. We've got wheel wells, we've got dashboards, we've got center consoles, all that's manufacturing. So I think that you're gonna see that same mix, or a very similar mix over here. Now you're gonna have the folks, we have, for example, in Riverside, we have Granger, and they pay $14 to $16 an hour for warehouse jobs. That's what we saw. But I think you're gonna see that more heavily towards the manufacturing in here, because I think it's gonna service the Kansas Avenue corridor, and it's gonna service Fairfax with new product, because you just can't put this kind of park in Armourdale, in Argentine, in Fairfax anymore, because you can't acquire, it's hard to acquire this much property.
One last thing, I appreciate you that we can't do the prevailing wage issue, but if you need any phone numbers of any of the unions in the metropolitan area, I would gladly give them to you.
I'm surprised you haven't texted me already.
All right, I'd entertain a motion. And there, one motion for two resolutions.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson. Kane. The vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. Our second public hearing is to consider an ordinance creating the Turner Logistics Community Improvement District. Again, I'd ask staff to make some opening remarks.
Same one. So this is this goes in tandem with the one that you just approved. This is a community improvement district for the Turner Logistics Center. Now, the only way that this will come into play is if North Point does not meet their minimum building requirements. So that is 1 million square feet of space within 5 years. So if the way that we have structured this is in order to get paid back, basically, kind of reimbursed for the money that we are fronting for the interchange, we have worked it out so that that can be reimbursed through this project. If they do not hit that 1 million square feet in 5 years, then we would have a CID ready to go that would make up for the balance. Again, we don't anticipate that this will ever have to come into play, but we have it kind of in our back pocket just in case. So if they do hit the minimum building requirements, then we'll just rip this up and move along with the IRB and everything else in the development agreement that you just approved.
Could you explain what a CID is for the public?
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. So a community improvement district, it can be a number of different things, but you're basically assessing an additional tax on yourself. And in this case, this would be a special assessment. So this would be a per square foot additional property tax that would be levied. And then that extra kind of additional funding that would come out of that additional tax would then, in this case, come back to the unified government to pay for the infrastructure.
And again, the taxes would only be on the development itself.
Correct.
Not on neighbors. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone present who'd like to speak in favor? Seeing none, anyone who'd like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, any questions or comments from the commission? Again, seeing none, I entertain a motion.
Move to approve the ordinance as submitted.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson. Kane. Vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. Under the Standing Committee's agenda, we have a resolution for the sale and lease of 834 Armstrong Avenue. Which is actually just, it's the YMCA of Greater Kansas City. It's the parking lot. The item received a vote of 4-1 for approval from the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Commissioner Burrows chaired the meeting. Would you like to make any comments?
Thank you, Mayor. There was much discussion. The overall support for the project does have merit. We addressed the parking issues, access to the parking lot for the local businesses. I believe there has been a remedy with the private investor, and that was really about all the questions outside of a partnership with the developer and the local government, and I believe that has been addressed also.
Thank you. Do any members of the commission have any questions or comments? Commissioner Murguia?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just say what I said at Standing Committee, and though that's not what's on the agenda tonight, whether or not to approve the project, one of the reasons I voted no is because I am concerned about the number of low-income housing units that are being built downtown. It seems like I've served on Economic Development Standing Committee for a number of years, and the only projects that we ever get are tax credit or low income. So I'm concerned. Data and research has said for years that concentrating poverty is not sustainable. And so I do have some concerns about that. But tonight, this is in regard to the parking lot and the lease agreement, and I just wanted to make mention of that.
Commissioner McKiernan?
I appreciate the concern, but I do think this is the first step in what ultimately will be a project that is very beneficial for our downtown, very beneficial for Kansas City, Kansas. When the rest of this project comes back, not just this parking lot piece, I'll get into some of the reasons that I think it will be so beneficial. I move to approve as submitted.
We have a motion and a second, and that would be Commissioner Bynum? All right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Vote is 10-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have 3 items under the administrator's agenda. The first item is the CAFR report, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. I'll turn the meeting over to Administrator Bach.
Thank you, Mayor. Annually, we go through and have an audit done of all our financial activity. Thank you, Mayor. Annually, we go through and have an audit done of our financial activity within the government by an outside auditor. This is our time of the year to come forward and report on the activity of that and what was found as they went through and did our audit. Presentation this evening will be led by our Deputy Chief Financial Officer, Debbie Johncher, as well as our CFO and our outside auditors. I'll turn this over to Debbie.
Good evening. As Mr. Bach said, we are here to report the results of our 2018 annual financial report. We'll just talk a little bit about what the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report is. We refer to it as the CAFR. It's a set of financial statements for the government. We comply with generally accepted accounting principles and governmental accounting standards board. Our financial statements are audited by an independent auditor. We have Alan Gibbs and Hulick, and we have Tara Laughlin here with them to report on information later in the presentation. The CAFR consists of 3 sections: the introductory section, the financial section, which contains the management discussion and analysis. That gives you a summary of all of the information contained. That section also includes financial statements as well as notes to the financial statements. The 3rd section is the statistical section, which has 24 tables of data giving about 10 years worth of information. The CAFR, I've listed the address where we'll put the CAFR out online. It has not been posted yet, but it will be posted within the next week. Why it's important to have a financial report. We want to be transparent to all of our citizens and all our stakeholders. The numbers tell the story. When we work on the budget, we're actually working on a fiscal plan for the future. The CAFR reports the actual financial reports for the prior year. The financial statements are required by state law and the bond documents. To get some highlights for the 2018 CAFR, the governmental funds deficit net position improved this year in 2018 by $12.3 million. Last year, we were at a deficit of $14.5 million, and while we're still in a deficit position, we are now at a deficit of $2.5 million. The restated retiree death and disability liability increased by $3.6 million. This is the first time this calculation was done. Last year, we did implement GASB 75 for changes in the OPEB actuarial assumptions, and OPEB stands for other post-employment benefits. And so we did see a reduction in our liability when we implemented last year, so this was a little bit of an increase. The net pension liability remained relatively flat, and general obligation debt grew by $28.8 million. We also had a modest increase in the general fund property tax revenues of $274,000. This was due to assessed value increase, as well as we had a $2 million decrease on the city general fund side. Fund balance for the general fund decreased by about $968,000. General fund reserves are at 19.3%. And the dedicated sales tax fund brings in about $10 million for public safety and infrastructure. This tax was set to expire in June of 2020. However, it was renewed by public vote and now will sunset in 2030. So now we'll go into a little bit of the financial results. We do use various accounting basis when reporting our information. For the near term, we have traditional fund statements that are reported on a modified accrual basis. I'm going to cover information related to those statements, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen to cover the financial position for the government-wide financial statements. Just to note, the public sector challenge for the primary goal of the private sector is to make a profit. But for governments, we have an economic goal, and that's to provide service to our citizens. Did want to note that the traditional fund statement information I'm going to go over only covers the unified government. We do include the financial information for the Board of Public Utilities in our report. However, this information that I'm going to be discussing is only for the unified government. Just looking at governmental fund balances, we've reported here for the last 6 years. We've got the general fund, capital projects fund, debt service, and our other governmental. One thing I did want to note is in 2018, the fund balance grows here, and that's attributable to the capital projects fund. And the reason that is because in 2018, we issued about $33 million in Public Building Commission bonds. Those were issued prior to the project starting. Usually we issue temporary notes, so until the project's completed, and then we do the permanent financing. For the Public Building Commission bonds, we issued those projects in advance of the project being completed. Talk a little bit about our general fund balance policy. We adopted a policy that states our goal to maintain a minimum fund balance in the general fund at 2 months of expenditures and transfers. That's 17%. For 2018, we ended the year at 19.3%. We had expenditures of just under $40 million. To get to 17%, we would have had expenditures at $35 million. So we were actually, the fund balance above the policy minimum was about $4.7 million. This graph just shows the fund balance over the last 10 years. You can see in 2009, we started out at about 9.3%. In 2015, we did reach the 17.1%, and now in 2018, we're at 19.3%. This next slide just shows our debt capacity. We presented this information before, just showing where our capacity is. The current debt limit is 30% of assessed value. And what this graph is showing is for 2018, we are at 58% of our debt limit. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kathleen Von Atchen.
The government-wide financial statements are two set of statements that begin on page 23. That's page 23 and 24. And they're actually combine the entire unified government, including the BPU, and present them as if it were a business. So it's important, an important 2 pages to take a look at. I'm going to just go straight to the bottom line, which is the net position. That's the line at the bottom. And so over the course since 2009, this is the composition of our net position. It's broken up into 3 categories: net investment in capital assets, which is the darker area; restricted, which is the lighter or the darker, well, medium blue, which is floating on the top; and then unrestricted, which is the lighter blue at the bottom. And in this past year, our net position has improved, as we mentioned, and this also includes the BPU, by the way. But our unrestricted amounts have gone down, or have the deficit position of the unrestricted amount increased, and so part of that is a result of activities in our internal service funds related to workers' compensation and health benefits. So this slide talks about did the unified government's financial position improve or deteriorate? And what it presents is a net position, the change in the net position divided by the beginning net position. So basically comparing the beginning and the end. And as you can see, in this past year, it increased by 8.2%. In the prior year, it increased by 5.4%. So I did want to point out that the Unified Government's Accounting Division of the Finance Department has won this award, the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement in Excellence in Financial Reporting. We've won this award over the past consecutive 19 years, and we won it again last year. And so here it is right here. And of course, it's only done by the teamwork of all of our UG departments who provide us information to the auditor and to others, as well as the ongoing day-to-day operations, everyone following our internal controls. And so it's a real achievement, and it's actually very important for the credit rating agencies. So next year it'll be 20 consecutive years, and we'll have a party. One item that I did also want to mention and acknowledge is that back in 2007, there were a variety of financial findings or audit findings, all of which were cleared. One in particular, up until 2016, one in particular was one called the finding for the audit, or for the accounting and financial reporting. And so that one we've had for a long time, and during the 2016 audit, it was taken away, and we had no audit findings at all for 1 year. And then we had some transition or some mix-up in staffing, and we ended up getting that finding last year again, as you might remember. And I'm very happy to announce that in order to get rid of that finding again, our current accounting manager, Pam Cahal, who's in the audience here with us, put together a corrective action and in order to get the finding done, and she accomplished it, and now we no longer have that finding. So it's no longer a significant deficiency. So I want to thank her for that. This is some of the work she did this past year. And of course, I also have to thank Debbie Johnsher for her support and assistance in this process as well. I'd like to recognize all of you, the Board of Commissioners, for your support of the Finance Department, all the department staff, because they all process accounts payable, accounts receivable, all of those financial areas. Doug Bach, Debbie Johnsher, all the accounting division staff, Ron Green, who is our payroll manager, very important. He manages a huge cost center for us. Reginald Lindsay, who you see quite a bit as our budget manager.
Rick McKessick, our county treasurer, and then, of course, the external audit team of AGH, who will be presenting here next. And so I introduce Tara, who will be discussing the required communications on this audit. Do you have any questions? Oh, and by the way, we have provided you a draft document because basically we didn't have enough time to get the actual books back from the printer in time for the meeting. So you will be receiving a hard copy of the actual books, unless you want to just stay with the PDF. So thank you.
Good evening. I'm Tara Laughlin with Allen Gibbs & Hulick. I'm a vice president in our assurance services department, focusing primarily with governmental entity audits, financial statement audits. As Kathleen mentioned, I'm here tonight to present the results on the audit side of the fiscal year 2018 CAFR. I first off just want to thank Kathleen, Debbie, and Pam and all of their staff throughout the process. Everybody worked well together, made the audit go really smoothly. Any goal of an audit is to make sure that that comprehensive annual financial report that you receive a copy of accurately reflects the books and records of the unified government so that you can rely on it as users and readers of those financial statements. I'm happy to report that that is the case. We are issuing an unmodified opinion on those financial statements, which is better known as a clean opinion. It's the highest level of opinion you can receive on financial statements. So what that says is those financials do accurately reflect the books and records and activity that happened during fiscal year 18 in the unified government. I am required annually to discuss certain topics with the governing board. You should have received a copy of our letter to the governing board that has all those required communications outlined in them. As far as the types of items I'm required to communicate, really hasn't changed much from the prior year, so I'm gonna hit on the highlights that impacted fiscal year 18 specifically. First off, as far as new accounting principles go, new standards go, that gets adopted into the financial statements. For the unified government itself, there wasn't too many significant changes this year. So when you're looking at last year's CAFR to this year's CAFR, as far as the accounting goes, there's been no significant changes in that area for the unified government. You will note, although we're not the auditors for the BPU, you will note when you're looking at the comprehensive annual financial report and the BPU information that they did adopt this year the other post-employment benefit standard, which increased their liability related to retiree healthcare costs. So you're gonna see an adjustment to beginning net position in the BPU activity of roughly $40 million. That is because of a new accounting standard, which the unified government early adopted last year for their OPEB plan. But I do want to point that out, even though we're not their auditors. If you're looking through that, that's why you see such a significant change in that BPU column. All numbers within the financial statements aren't hard and fast known numbers. There are some estimates that have to take place. We are required to communicate that to you. As far as this year, there's no new estimates within the financial statements themselves. So the estimates are things, for example, for your net pension liability, so the unified government's participation in the CAPERS pension plan, that OPEB plan that we've already discussed this evening, as well as some estimates, for example, for your work comp liability, potential payouts. All those are estimates. From an audit standards perspective, we do obtain an understanding of how management goes about making those estimates. We review information and data that's used to calculate those estimates. And in all cases, we have found that management's estimates are reasonable and are based on reasonable, complete, accurate information. One other area we are to discuss annually is any audit adjustments that are done during the audit period. At this point, I do want to kind of piggyback on what Kathleen has already said this evening. So this year, the significant deficiency was removed, mainly because the number of audit adjustments that we performed this year, as well as the dollar value going into those adjustments, declined significantly. And after that transition year last year, Pam took over kind of some of the year-end report prep processes that we may have assisted with a little bit more heavily in 2017 versus this year. So all that extra hard work paid off. She addressed those corrective action plans that were posted up there earlier. And we were able to remove that significant deficiency. So if you're looking through this year's letter and last year's letter, it is shorter because that significant deficiency was removed. We are also required to report on any uncorrected misstatements. I always like to explain this because initially it doesn't look like a very good term. Sometimes during the audit process, there's some items that come up during the process that management determines not to be significant or would mislead readers or users of the financial statements. So it's not reflected in the current year financial statements. We review all of that as well, and we agree with management that it's not misleading. But those are provided to you in the back of the letter in separate schedules, so you can see what those items are that weren't actually reflected within the fiscal year 18 financials. However, those items self-correct, so it's not like they don't get recorded. They're just not recorded in fiscal year 18. They're going to be recorded in the fiscal year 19. So usually those items are items that are just timing issues. And overall, the overall dollar value of that was roughly about $875,000 for the unified government as a whole. So when you look at the big picture, those items are relatively smaller items. Buried kind of in the middle of this letter is a header labeled Other Disclosures, and I always like to point this out because within that paragraph, we discussed that we had no disagreements with management, no disagreements over accounting practices involved to record information within the financial statements. And I always think that's very important to point out, that there is a good relationship, a good working relationship between the auditors and management, and questions we ask or information we ask for is always provided timely in order to get through the audit process. The very last section of that letter, we do provide just some general information over risk areas that impact all entities, whether it's corporate entities, government entities. They're not necessarily UG-specific risks, but they're risks that are just out there in the environment that we like to provide some background information to governing bodies, just to be aware that those items are out there. Those really relate to the cybersecurity or information security risks. Every day, people are trying to hack into every system or steal money through email. So we always like to provide that background information, just a little bit of research. That way you're aware of those risks that are out there. When you're in other meetings, you might think about some questions that you might want to ask regarding how those risks are being mitigated within the government itself. That is all that I have to present this evening, unless anybody has any questions.
No one wants to do a deep dive here? Apparently not. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Congratulations again on the award. Thank you so much for your hard work. All right, let's go to item number 2. It relates to the sale of a car wash facility at 9801 Troop Avenue. Mr. Bach?
Thank you, Mayor. I will probably start with just a little bit of a introduction to this, as this is a facility that's out and related to the Vacation Village where Schlitterbahn is located. Early today, we had an announcement that came out that was made that Schlitterbahn had sold their Texas water parks to Cedar Fair, which is the owner of Worlds of Fun in our community in the Kansas City area. They also included with this an option to buy the Schlitterbahn Water Park in Kansas City, Kansas for an additional $6 million. So this is one that is unrelated to the two items that are on the agenda tonight, but since it was actively part of our community and part of the development area that's out there, I thought that I would go ahead and make that mention. We've been informed that we believe the representatives from Cedar Fair will be contacting me in the near future, and we'll have some conversation about how they can move forward with acquisition of that and discussion on the option that they have in that area. I don't really have anything else or other knowledge on that to be able to report. So I wanted to let you know, at least know what I know about that and what's been published. So we look forward to that. The two items on the agenda tonight are really, they are just items we have in our agreement. If the owner of the property is there to sell property, we often do this in our major development areas. If they go to transfer property to a different owner, we make them come back to us. We're able to review the owner, look at them, make sure that they are being assigned all the other terms of the development agreement, so they have to carry on and keep all that up. So that's really our approval to turn that over to them, and then they have to move forward with it. The first one of the two is the car wash that exists on the site. And then the second one on the agenda is for the vacant lot south of the convenience store that's out there for anticipated to be a new Spire Healthcare. With that, Mayor, I would take any questions or recommend approval of these items.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
No.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Vote is 9-1, the motion carries.
Thank you.
I would recommend approval of item number 3. It requires a separate vote.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Vote is 10-0, that motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes the portion of our regular meeting. We are adjourned in that capacity. I now call us back to order as the Land Bank Board of Trustees. Does any member of the commission or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on the Land Bank consent agenda? Please come to the podium, state your name and city of residency.
Hello, my name is Tasir Mank, and I stay in Wyandotte County, Kansas. Do I say now what I'm opposing, or do I wait?
Yes, which of the properties are you?
Number 2.
Number
The whole
two.
number 2.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Vote is 10-0, that motion carries.
Okay. Mr. Slaughter? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Good evening. Okay, tonight we have 5 applications that are up for approval. We have 4 yard extensions and 1 property acquisition. So
I
the
think
first,
you just go to the second item that was set aside?
yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
So the first one we have is a yard extension for 1040 Split Log, which is on your screen in red, and the applicant is at 1042 Split Log, which is outlined in black to the west. Next, we have property acquisition and a yard extension. The applicant lives at 1267 here outlined in black, and then outlined in red are the 2 land bank properties, which were also approved as property donation, or I'm sorry, transfers tonight. Next is 1502 is the applicant, North 55th, and the one in yellow is actually the land bank property, 1506 North 55th. And we have the applicant at 1527 South 34th Street. The property that was transferred for approval tonight also is 1528 Woodland Boulevard. And those are our requests for final approval.
Thank you. Anyone present who'd like to speak in support of this? Seeing none, please come forward.
Hello. So on April 20...
Please state your name and city of
Tasir
residence.
Mank, Wyandotte County, Kansas.
Thank you.
On April 25th, Mr. Slaughter came before you all. He asked, could it be a hole put on the northeast side? And then on the 9th, it was approved and also put into effect about a 2-year lease program. And to my understanding, that was also Wyandotte County-wide. So I want to know how come the 3 gentlemen that were here applying to do yard acquisitions or yard extensions were turned down, but these 5 are able to buy them without a 2-year lease program? Because it was supposed to be one, and Ms. McGee brought it up on the Monday night meeting. She asked about it, and they never really answered it. So I'm trying to figure out, why is it okay for this side of town to be able to buy, and one of the people, they couldn't put in 2 applications for a yard extension, so he helped them by saying they were gonna do a house requisition and a yard extension. And they turned down Mr. Owens and the 2 young men who wanted to do that very same thing on the north end of town. So I'm trying to, and he said that the 2-year lease program was supposed to be for Wyandotte County. So why is it a difference on that side of town and not on this side of town?
Mr. Slaughter?
The hold that was in place that was later reinstated is just for the northeast area. There's no applications tonight in that area. I want to state for the record that nobody has been turned down, nobody has been denied, just the ones in those areas just haven't been brought before you for final consideration.
But the leasing program, you said that everybody had to lease their properties, or lease the property or the lot for 2 years before selling it. That was not limited to the northeast side, that was Wyandotte County-wide. So I want to know why nobody argued about that side.
Right. I'm sorry, Mr. Slaughter, and I'm sorry you're not allowed to come back up and.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Slaughter?
As you remember, I think it was last month, we approved the lease program. The lease program is available. These applications were in the queue. They have indicated that they do not want to lease, they want to purchase. That's why they're here tonight.
Thank you. All right. Any questions or comments from the commission?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrick. Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows. Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Johnson. Kane. Vote is 9-1, that motion carries.
Thank you all. That concludes our meeting for the evening. Thank you for our attendance. We are adjourned.